All right, in today's episode of Building the Metaverse, we are talking about ridiculous levels of optimization on your textures and three different levels of texturing 3D assets. So, level one is Atlas texturing, level two is Tileable textures, and level three is custom or bespoke textures. And this video today is brought to you by our sponsors, Utopia VR. They are a metaverse company powered by Mozilla Hubs, and they are aligned with me in trying to train as many 3D artists to take advantage of this opportunity as possible. They're a bunch of really cool people, and you can check out their website, utopiavr.com. Let's go check it out. It's awesome. And now let's watch the video. Atlas textures are super duper cool. If I just pop over to something that's using an Atlas texture, this gradient here is going from like light green in the bottom right to darker green in the top left. And this plant over here has all these gradients going from darker, super dark green in the center to lighter green towards the tips. And we have, a darker yellow here at the base of this flower thingy. To the top is a lighter yellow, and everything kind of gradates. Now, gradients can take a whole lot of pixels to do them smoothly, or they don't have to if you have what's called an Atlas texture. So this Atlas texture here looks like, is that it? This right here. It is an extremely small image. I think this is 32 pixels by 32 pixels. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure. No, I think it's probably 32 by 32 or 64 by 64, but it's a far distance away from like a 1K texture map or a 2K or a 4K, obviously. This is a super duper small texture. And on this, I have my little color palette here, which I picked for this office. These are the colors that I thought would be, kind of primarily used. And I don't even think I'm using all of them. But as an example, if I look at these UVs on this plant, I'm getting this whole plant textured with super smooth gradients across the whole thing for a 32 by 32-bit texture. And the way I do that is I just literally smush and smash all of the UVs onto the sections that I would like them to have that color on them, right? So if I blow it up, you can see it's a super psychedelic plant now, which actually looks pretty cool. But if I scale these back down, I can change that to blue, I can change that to brown, I can change that to purple. I can do whatever I want with these. I just so happen to want like this dark green to light green. And I literally took each one of these. If I select this, I hit L, then I'm going to select linked, and it's going to select all of the ones in there. And I can move that one to any of these other ones. And if I wanted it to be dark on the outside and light on the inside, then I would do it like that. Just flip that around, and I'm just rotating these UVs. So on the space, they're aligned differently. And that's why each one looks a little bit unique, and it gradates nicely, and it's practically free. It's a 32 by 32-bit texture, or a 32 pixel texture square. It's like nothing. Like it takes no time at all to load. And basically any flat colors or any gradients can be using the same thing. So this plant and this wall logo are the same material. They have the same color atlas here on this one as this one. It's just this one is on a different section of the UVs. You can see that it's really, really small, right? Because I'm actually just gradating from this color to this color, right? Just these two colors. And I can change that, I can make it a bit bigger, and I can make the gradient a bit more extreme, right? And that doesn't look too bad. It's not bad. But this one's just squished like that, so I can make it gradate across even more of these colors. But yeah, you get the point. This is like a super simple way to make like a lot of textures. You can put down a lot of texture and a lot of color into a scene practically for free. This back here, this is using a different material because it's got its metallicness all the way to the top. But all of these are using the same color atlas texture map. Even though it's on a different material, it's still the same texture map. So I only need to have one texture associated with all of these different these different elements, these different objects, right? And this one's the same thing. This one's actually the same color map, but plugged into an emission. So this is actually going to be a light. So if I were to render this with Eevee, then you see that that's actually emitting light based off of where it is on the color map, on the Atlas map. So if I made it green, all of a sudden, let's see. Oh, no, it's not doing it. Oh, I think I have actual lights behind there too. Let's see. Oh, it's really, really bright. So I need to bring that down. And I make it blue. Look, there's blue lights, there's purple lights. Oh, it's actually using a slightly, I think it's using a different Atlas map. I guess that could be even more optimized because these colors aren't lining up. But you can see how I can just change all of these colors around um, to make it to make that light color change to whatever I would want it to be. And again, this is all like really, really inexpensive in terms of render time. Now, I'm actually rendering this out as a light. You know, this is a path tracing engine right now because I'm using Cycles, which this is my first use of Cycles X. Oh, no, it's not because this is 2.93. I did just upgrade to Blender 3.0, but I didn't automatically open it because I kept both. But yeah, that's just a way that you can optimize your textures really, really efficiently. The next layer of that is some things cannot be atlased. Before I move on, any questions about that? That all makes sense? Did anyone not know about that before and now you know about it?
I didn't know, and it's so cool.
Yeah, it's efficient. Okay.
Neither did I.
Cool. Yeah, it's super duper efficient. And there are a lot of scenes. Actually, I should bring one up. Let me see. There are a lot of scenes you'll find on like Sketchfab that do the entire scene with like one very small atlas texture, but with like a full color palette on it. There's let's see, shark. There's this shark tank scene. Let's see. Dang it. Underwater shark cage. Oh, geez. I don't know where it is. Let's see. Underwater shark. Yeah, this one. This isn't exactly the one, but I bet you it's doing the same thing. Underwater. Mm. Yeah, so these actually looked textured. So I've become a liar. Um, there's a scene. I'll find it later. I can drop it into the chat. I'll show you guys, you know, like a super powerful atlas texture, but it's basically like a full color palette, like it's a full color wheel, and you just drag and drop and pull your vertices of around different areas of this color wheel in order to paint your objects. And you're painting with like you know, a 32 or even a 64 by 64 texture, and it's every color in the scene. The downside with doing that is that, well, I mean, it will look very cartoony because you get flat colors and gradients kind of exclusively. Or you could paint something like this wood plank wall. Like you could technically do all of that with Atlas texture mapping, but you would need to have enough UVs in order to get each plank, and so then your topology would be kind of through the roof. So obviously there's limits to this technique, and that's where I kind of want to go to that next tier up, which is the next very efficient but less efficient form of texturing is these tileable textures, right? And these tileable textures, everyone should probably be pretty familiar with it, but you know, just as a quick overview, these are got UVs on them, and let me just. They have these UVs on them, and there's two UV sets. One of them is for the texture map, and one of them is for one of them is for the light map. And you can see I'm on the light map right now. The light map has to go inside of the 0 to 1 space because you can't tile them. But the UV map you can see is huge, right? It's massive, and that's because this is a very small texture. It's a small texture, but it has a lot of detail in it. And when I scale that up like that, then I have this like really, really detailed floor, but you can see the tiling, right? This happens to be very low variation, and so it does make sense for the tile to be visible, like the tiling to be there. It's normal for carpet to appear that way, but we want to break that up with an additional non-tiled map, which would be like that level 3, which is unique texturing, which we're not on yet. So this is tileable, and this is tileable, and you can see that, this is the same thing where it's like this UV map is scaled way, way, way up. And the more you scale it up, the denser that wood wall would appear. And the smaller it is, the bigger that wood wall would appear. And this is actually super duper important in terms of scale because as an audience, we don't have any scale reference from the model, right? All of that comes from the textures. So if I were to, take this and scale it way, way, way down, now all of a sudden this feels like we're in a toy now. It's like, oh, okay, this is a very small room. Let me just hide all this. Right? It's like it looks like a little toy, right? But if I make it the other way around, if I scale this way, way, way up, all of a sudden this can feel like, oh my gosh, it's a huge freaking warehouse, right? It's like a gigantic hallway because this carpet is so, so high resolution now. It feels like it's like a Toy Story type scenario, right? So the only reference that we have for scale as an audience is the texture resolution and how much of a thing that we can see. So it's really important to try to get this right. And when looking at reference, you want to actually count how many times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, probably 7.5, or maybe like 7.0, because this is half of one and that's 2/3 of one and that's 1/3 of one. So it's probably like 7 tiles across. Now, if each tile was 1 foot, that would be 7 feet. Is a hallway 7 feet long? Is that congruent with what we understand that hallways would typically be? Or is that maybe only 9 inches, and so it would be, 45 inches would be a little bit under 4 feet. It depends on how big this tile would actually be in real life. But we have an intuition, and our subconscious has a very thorough understanding of what all those scales should look like. And as an artist, if you're not adhering to that subconscious understanding, then you're going to trip up a lot because people are going to be like, "Oh, it feels weird." And in the space, when you're walking around in a metaverse space, there is some implicit scale because you are a certain height and things are a certain size relative to you as you walk through doors and stuff. But this is one of those things where it takes a lot of fine tuning to be able to make sure that this door doesn't feel gigantic, doesn't give you claustrophobia either, right? You got to really make it so that you walk through this door and it feels just right. Now, in non VR work and just regular 3D work, we really can't do that without a scale reference of like a character or something we all know the size of, or with the texture resolution, like I was saying. But in this metaverse stuff, on this next tier, this next industry, it's like, okay, you actually have to walk around. You actually have to walk through the spaces and go, does that ceiling feel too short? Because if your ceiling feels like it's right here, then you're going to give people a discomfort and claustrophobia, right? On the other side of it, if it's way too big, you're going to make people feel small and insignificant, right? And there is an emotional response that we have to scale. Scale is not something that you can just measure out and say a door is 8 feet, or I don't know, doors are 8 feet, right? I think they are. I think doors are 8 feet tall. So if you measure out a door at 8 feet and you put it in to your scene and it's exactly 8 feet, but you walk around and it doesn't feel right, you got to go with the feeling. Make it smaller, make it taller, do whatever you got to do to make it feel right. Because true scale in video games often feels very claustrophobic, right? We actually want a little bit more space. But scale is actually an emotional thing. It's super weird. If there was a VR experiment that was so amazing at demonstrating this, this is like back in like maybe 2016, um, 2017 maybe. It was a game where you had a VR headset and you were in a small forest. And as you walked towards one corner, you scaled up. And as you walked towards the other corner, you scaled down. So like well, you start out regular size and you start walking, and all of a sudden you start getting bigger and bigger, and you're like, whoa, I am all powerful. I feel amazing. I feel like you feel uplifted by that experiment. And then when you start walking in the other direction, you're like, I'm going to go way over to those mountains. And then you start scaling down and get smaller and smaller and smaller. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I didn't get very far at all because now my steps are tiny and the trees are huge. And it's like, scary and overwhelming and you feel insignificant, right? So there's a huge emotional barometer there for how big you are is actually going to affect your audience emotionally. And so it is another place to be creative. You can put people in a room where it's awe-inspiring and they are a little bit small, or you can put them on top of a throne where they feel gigantic in comparison to all the things around them. And both of these things can be in the same environment depending on where they are. You have trigger different emotional responses. So scale is a huge thing. And in terms of this like particular project, my focus is just on making the scale feel comfortable, natural, like what we might expect, and avoid the uncanny valley of being almost there but not quite there. And I went through many iterations of scaling this carpet until it felt as good as it does now. So that's kind of tilables wrapped up. Any question on that stuff on the level 2 tileable thing? Pretty basic stuff. I don't think I'm breaking any new ground here. So level 3 is the most expensive textures, which is unique textures. Something like this table, right? This table is non-tileable, and let's see. Let me pull it up. There we go. This is what it looks like. It has a lot of wasted space here. You know, like all this space over here is just being loaded in and not being used. It's a bummer. Wish could use more of it, but we can't tile this. You know, if I select all these and then scale it up, the tile does not work. And well, it does kind of look a little bit cool, but yeah, it doesn't work. And it has a tremendous amount more detail associated with it. So this table can only be this table. It can only be in that spot, and it can only have that texture space. So these are really expensive. You'll notice that everything that I'm doing, I'm trying to optimize to the absolute best of my ability. So this chair, tileable, right? That's just a tileable carpet texture on there. The floor is tileable. The plant is an atlas. The window frame here, that's an atlas. The window frame on the other side there, that's atlas. This couch is an atlas. Actually, this couch isn't even an atlas. It's just a flat material. Like it doesn't even have a texture. It could. It would be nicer if it did, but you know, it just didn't get to it. The ceiling is an atlas. The ceiling lights are an atlas. The doors here, those are a unique texture because on this one, it actually says MetaHead with the old logo, right? So that is an actual unique texture like that. It's the same texture for both of them, just on 2 different spots, right? So it's not super inefficient, but I can't tile them, and I really can't use it anywhere else either. And then this table is a unique texture. But everything else, I'm trying to get into level 1. If there needs to be more detail than the level 1 Atlas texture will be able to provide, then I push it up into a tileable, right? And that gives me a lot of freedom too, because those tiles can be pretty low resolution and still get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of how many pixels you're actually showing on screen and how much details you're delivering through the monitor. And then after that, level 3 is like, okay, it's not tileable, it's not atlasable. It's actually a unique texture painted object that I'm going to take the time to actually texture paint in 3D software like Painter or Photoshop or whatever. And it will be unique to that object. And unless I duplicate that object, it won't appear anywhere else in the scene. And even if I do duplicate that object, then you'll be able to see the tiling of it or the repetition, the twinning across the objects. And so that's not good either. And so I may need to make unique textures for every object at that level. So those are the most expensive, right? And you want to have the least amount of them as possible. But for a feature set, it's great. Like people walk in and go, "Oh, I freaking love this table." Every time people come into the space, they go, "I love this table and I love the view." Right? Well, the view is not tileable, right? It's a level 3 asset, right? And the same with the table. But that's adding in those feature hero assets, those hero textured assets is what can really bring your space to life. So if you have a texture budget of so many, you're only allowed so many 1K textures, you're only allowed so many 2K textures, and you're allowed incredibly few 4K textures. Like if you only have a budget for this, you can put as many assets as possible into Atlas, and then after that as many as necessary into Tileable, and then a few featured assets that are like really really epic that get their own textures, that get their own shaders, and they stand out by themselves, and they are the most expensive assets in the room, but they deliver the wow factor, so it's worth the investment. And that's kind of how I've set up the texturing for this room, and I've set up the texturing for all my other rooms as well. Any questions on any of those levels or any of that texturing process or how I did it or how I set it up or anything?
Um, so so you only use unique textures for, let's say, any objects that you make or hero assets.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
For this space. Now, I know you do a lot of work in Unreal Engine, right?
Right.
They Unreal Engine is more powerful. This is specifically for Web 3D, Web XR, immersive web stuff. So, this is my office as you go to metahood.ca and you click on my office and it will load up in the browser. So if you're delivering 3D assets through browser, this level of texture optimization is important. But delivering 3D assets through the browser or what's called the immersive web or Web 3 or, whatever, the metaverse, whatever buzzword you want to associate with this new industry, it's going to be a tremendous amount of work. There's a lot of work in this space for immersive web artists. Like there's just, there's every single client or every single brand in the world is going to be considering this and as something that they want to be able to offer to stand out from the crowd, because basically it only takes one therapist in your neighborhood to have an online virtual therapy room on like in a cabin or on the beach or on Mars or wherever before every other therapist in the neighborhood goes, "Oh shit, we need one now too." Because for just a little bit more per hour, they're offering this whole immersive space and we don't have one. We're still doing Zoom meetings and it's making people uncomfortable and the pandemic hasn't gone anywhere. And so, if you have an immersive space as a therapist, then all of a sudden you're really able to open the doors to people all across the world and have deliver an even higher quality product. And that's basically going to happen to every single business, right? Every single business is going to have somebody that pushes this forward, that gets an immersive space, that does it well, and then starts benefiting from that. And so every other business is going to be like, holy shit, we got to get in on this, right? So the 2022 is going to be huge for the immersive web. And that's part of the reason why we're like, I'm streaming this today is to try to train you guys up on this ridiculously optimized textures. Like, I'm talking about painting this whole scene with a single 64 by 64-bit texture. And you can do that and have it be super cartoony. Like I'm gonna pull up an example here. I've got to I'm just going to pause the stream really quickly because there's some stuff that's NDA that I have to get through before I can get to the example.
I am a little behind here, so what's an atlas?
Oh, okay, yeah, no worries. I'll pop
Thank
that
you.
open. Yeah, no worries. It's a little bit of a review, if that's all good. File new. How you doing, Ovid, by the way? Nice to see you.
I'm doing good. Yeah, nice to see you too.
Good. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So here's another example. This was a scene taken from Sketchfab that we did a little bit of work on for a client, and you can see the whole thing is painted with this like super cartoony colors, and we have this little Yeah, I'm not following him. So that's because I won't be able to. So just to finish what I was saying there is that that Shark Tank scene, it was all super cartoony and it's all done on an atlas map. The entire scene is basically just a color wheel, and I can show you. I have the color wheel in the Discord, so I'm just going to drop the image into the chat. It's going to take me a second. All right, because this is a I had to disconnect to do it, but it's in there now, and you can see it's just that color palette that like just it's like a full rainbow color palette, and they have just assigned the polygons, the UVs to different sections of that color palette in order to paint the diver and the boat and the sharks and all that stuff. The downside of doing this for everything is that one, you're limited to just flat colors and gradients, and two, you will need a new polygon or a new vertice or a new UV for every different color change. So what you're sacrificing, what you're gaining in texture space, you may actually be sacrificing a little bit in polygons. But finding that happy medium is a seriously optimized way to do work. And a lot of like full 3D scenes, like full cartoony games, like even full indie games are done entirely with just Atlas textures. It's like one macro 256 by 256 color map of every single color that they would possibly be able to use in their game. And they just every single asset gets put somewhere onto that texture. So essentially their texturing is free and they can use a little bit more they can get a little higher frames per second on mobile devices or a little bit higher fidelity models because they have a little bit extra space because they're not using textures at all. Or even what I think is what I was going to finish today's lecture with is the more that you do this type of optimization, the more detail and resolution and variation that you can add into your light map, right? Because if you have one like 64 by 64 texture that's running all of the colors in your scene, then you can have a 2K or even a 4K light map, give all the juicy details to the lighting and make it look really, really nice. It will look cartoony, but it will still look really, really nice lighting. So it is, getting to choose what you want and where you want to spend your texture resolution budget. Any questions on any of that stuff that I might be able to answer without having a computer?
I think I got it.
Yeah. Sounds okay. Yeah, have to search up more, but yeah.
This whole thing was recorded, so you can catch up for that first 15-20 minutes of it later. I'll have it in the archive channel.
Great.
in the
Thank
Discord.
you.
No worries.
I think the only question I have about using Atlas maps is when you create a model and then you export the UV, I'm like, I know a little bit about 3D modeling. I've done some stuff, but so when you export the UV, so instead of using like a custom texture, you would probably would you just use would you create like an image that all of your textures would be textured off and just put them in like that little square, like a little piece of real estate of color, which would make them all be different colors, right? But so you would just take different UV maps. So you're not putting like several UV maps on one Atlas texture.
Okay, so let me see if I can break down your question a little bit.
All right.
Let's use an example. So as an example, that shark, right? So there's a shark model. The bottom of the shark is brighter than the top of the shark. It's two different colors of blue gray or cool gray, right? So all the bottom polygons we would do a planar projection on, scale those way, way, way down, and put them on a light blue gray one. All the top of the shark, we'd do a planar projection of that, and then we'd scale those way, way, way down, and we put them on a different pixel that's slightly darker gray. That material can be used on the diver as well, though. And so the diver's UVs will still be on that same texture sheet. The shark's UVs will still be on that same texture sheet. And all of them will only have one UV set for each object. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, sort of. I feel like I probably need to experiment in Blender and see how to do that because I'm like my brain's like trying to like sort of understand it, but it's still sort of having trouble at the same time.
Yeah, definitely doing it will finalize your understanding. It's very, very simple. So what I would suggest doing is take any asset that you have or any prop or anything like that, like something that might have multiple, like a traffic cone. Model yourself a quick little traffic cone. It's dark orange with a white stripes, white stripes on it, and model the edge loops. Model the edge loops for those stripes where they would be. Select the faces of those stripes and put them on one section of an atlas map, which is actually just two colors, just orange and almost white. And then take the UVs from that strip and put them on the white one, and take all the other polygons and the UVs from all the other polygons and put them on the orange one, and then you'll have a traffic cone with two colors. That is basically, it can be a 2-pixel texture.
All right, yeah, I'll give it a try.
Yeah, and you can drop that into the chat or into the web feedback. And if you run into any problems or anything like that, then just post it in there, and we'll take a look, and we'll see if we can work it out together.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No worries.
So
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Al.
because they are using all the same UV texture, they also have the same material.
Yes, but you can use different materials. Like I had an example earlier where one of them was is the flat colors for the plants, and the other one was a metallic object. And the same atlas map is plugged into those two different materials, but it's only one texture. It's the same texture for both.
Oh, okay, okay. So you're not creating any copy or duplicate of the texture. You're just using the same texture.
Yep, just one texture. And the nice thing is it's so small. Like you can have a 16 by 16, and if you double it, a 32 by 32, because you needed more colors, like it's still, it's still very, very small. And when you think about a 32 by 32 bit texture in area, that's over 900 pixels. Right? So you could have over 900 individual colors. That's way more colors than I need to paint a room.
Right.
And it's just a 32 by 32 bit texture. But yeah, you can plug it into as many materials as you like, but I try to keep the amount of materials down. So all of the plants and the window frames and all that stuff, they're all on one material. and then all the metallic objects are all in one material, and all of the emissive objects are all in one material. And it's one texture map that plugs into all three of those materials. And those three materials run everything at that level 1 Atlas texturing level. Any other questions before we wrap this one up? Sorry about the ending there. It's a bit of a bummer that the power went out. I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of the day. I guess take the dog for a walk.
I just want to say I like what you said earlier about the suspension of disbelief and how important it is, and how by playing with it you can actually create different emotional qualities to the work that you're putting people in. There's a whole brand of psychology, I'm sure, dedicated towards the creation of space. And the idea that you can, it just reminded me something of a horror game that I used to play a long time ago. I think it's American McGee Alice, where you walk through a doorway and suddenly the doorway is enormous and you're very insignificant, and really sort of messes with how you perceive the environment. But I like that we could do that, that you have that, if you wanted to create like a horror meta, there's a whole like realm, there's a whole realm of tools that you can play with to create feeling without actually having anything relating to horror, just the expectation of it. Anyway, I just thought that was really interesting. I wanted to say something.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, it is really powerful stuff. And I think the beginning, the foundation kind of start of this is like building your scenes, making them feel like realistic and all that stuff, or making them make sense, making them make design sense and all that stuff. But once those foundation stuff are out of the way, like everything becomes about how you're making your audience feel. And we basically before everything was like mood was lighting almost entirely. Like if you look at the same scene with different lighting, it's changes the mood completely. Mood and lighting and color are like the biggest informants of mood. But now scale is a huge informant of mood too, because it has that grandiosity or that insignificance baked in to how we are experiencing the scale of our scene. And if you're tiny, even like beautiful lighting, like blue sky, green grass, like just like very the first 10 minutes of Up, when they're hanging out on the picnic on the top of the hill with the tree, like just if it was that beautiful and that serene and that comfortable, but you're tiny, it's scary. Right? You'd be like, oh crap, I'm worried about bugs coming by and eating me, or birds coming and eating me. Like it introduces an anxiety to a scene that would never have had it before, and vice versa. If it's like super hellish and Scar from the Lion King, exploding gas geysers in red and black and evil and dark shadows, but you're gigantic, it's like, I'm not worried about it. So there is now like this even bigger influence on mood than just lighting and color, which was the biggest informant before, at least for me. I'm speaking entirely subjectively. But that for me was like the biggest informant of mood. And now it's like, wow, that's actually secondary to scale, which is nuts, because it's like the top of the pyramids. There's a start of the next pyramid. It's nuts. So thanks for bringing that up and giving me an opportunity to rant about it a little bit more.
I always enjoy
What's
your
going
rants.
on? Sorry about that. What was that?
I always enjoy your rants.
Thanks, buddy. Right back at you. Misha, you came in at the end of this one. I'm closing it down because my power went out. But it was recorded and it will be added to the archive sometime, hopefully today or perhaps tomorrow, depending on how much I am able to do with my current power situation.
Okay.
Well, guys, if there's no other way for me to add value to your guys' day, I'm going to bounce and see if there's something that I can do in this house. But save my battery, so that way if I need it later, I'll have it.
Thanks,
All right.
Connor.
All right. Thank you, Connor.
Thanks, Connor.
Thank you, Connor.
Cheers, guys. No worries. All good.
Bye.
See ya.